Hey, what is up, guys? And I have just finished watching Slasher Season 3, and holy shit. Like, I literally just watched it, and it's like giving me chills how it ended. It was so fucking good. First off, I want to give a props to the trailer footage that's playing in the background. I got that from Focus on Horror, the channel. He or she uploaded the trailer, and that's usually what I use for my background. So thank him or her for that. I'm going to try to not ramble on too much like I've done in the other videos. I'm just going to try to get right to the points. And so here we go. I thought this was one of the best, I think this is the best season of Slasher that they've put out because this kind of kicks everything up to another level. Now, this season started off very kind of cliche, and I was like, "Oh my god, why are people acting like this?" I'm not. This already seems like it's gonna suck and not live up to par to the two previous seasons, but it actually does and delivers a little bit more. Man, this shit was crazy. Like all the seasons before it, this slasher season focuses on one killer going around killing multiple people. He's a serial killer, and the weird thing about this is that this season it actually takes place all in one day slash one night, and yeah, the episodes are titled like 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. or 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. stuff like that. So you kind of get a time frame of when things are happening in each episode. There aren't enough horror movies or horror shows that depict like a serial killer out there. Like I said in I think I said this in my previous season 1 and season 2 reviews. We have so many paranormal horror movies and so many just horror movies that we need to get back to like Scream and Psycho, things like that, and this definitely fits the bill and it's like a throwback. I love it. That's why I love this series. Now, I'm not going to explain the whole I'm not going to go through the plot for point. I'm just going to kind of go through the things that I thought were very cool to me. But I will start out like this. The episode or the season actually starts out with this guy who's returning home to his apartment complex from a party, and he's being chased by this stalk. Well, we'll call it a stalker. The name of the killer in this is the Druid, so we'll call him the Druid. He's being chased by the Druid, and he runs through his apartment, knocking on everybody's door, "Help me! Help me! Help me!" And nobody helps him. And at this point, I was like, "Okay, seriously, nobody's gonna open the door for this guy. Nobody. You all are just gonna look at him die." And that's exactly what happened. They watch him die. He Nobody helps him. He gets run over actually in the street. He gets stabbed by the druid a couple times, but then he ultimately dies by running into the street and getting ran over by a car. And then after that, all of a sudden, everybody swarms the street. Everybody comes out and they're just looking. They got their cell phones out and they're posting on Instagram, Twitter, and all of that stuff. And this is actually where things start, and everything kind of builds off this moment. Um, One thing I did like about this season is that there's broad daylight murders. Like this guy's literally talking on his cell phone, and he turns his back on. I guess he saw the druid, but he didn't think anything of it. He turns his head for like one split second, then the druid comes running at him full speed and just whacks him right in the fucking throat. And he turns around, and then the druid just goes in whacking him like a tree, like he's fucking Paul Bunyan, not Paul Bunyan, Paul Bunyan cutting down woods in the forest and shit. He chops off his head, mounts it to his car, and then that's when the police show up, and that's when we get the detective, who's gonna be a recurring character throughout this whole season. She's the one that's on every murder case in this episode or in this season, and yeah, a lot of the kills, like in all seasons. I think this one had the most creative ones though. Uh, Xander, I remember his name. Xander is the guy with he's the guy with the curly mustache, the hipster guy that works in the coffee shop. So he ends up getting killed by a stabbing, of course. but the druid sticks like a he sticks like a test tube or something like a container down his throat and ends up pouring hot water down his throat and then putting a straw in his neck so his blood like leaks out. And it wasn't just a straw, it was a fucking bendy straw of all things. I don't know why he's carrying around that, but he that's what he did. Another great death scene was the well, actually there's so many death scenes, man. I okay, the next one I guess I'll talk about is Cassidy, who's the slut teenager who sleeps around with everybody. So she got killed by having an acid bath in the toilet. Then the druid hid her body up up in the vents of the girls' bathroom, which nobody found for like it seemed like 2 days, but you know the show actually happens in like one day. So I think it was like a couple of hours, at least 6 or 7 hours. But yeah, her death scene was pretty cool and gruesome. I wish she would have lasted a little bit longer because Cassidy, she was a slut and all, but she had a lot of sass, and I wanted to kind of see more come from her. Another death scene that I liked is the dissection. Now there was a teacher who's the teacher of everybody, all the kids in this show, the teenagers, I guess. She was a teacher, and earlier that day they were dissecting frogs, and then she ends up getting killed by the druid, basically drugging her, putting her on her. He takes her back to the classroom, puts her on the table, ties her down, and then starts surgically cutting her down the middle of her chest, and then basically ripping open, Mortal Kombat style, ripping open her chest, and then he starts to get these fucking shears, like shears you use outside on your lawn or cutting hedges and stuff. And then he takes those shears and he just starts crushing her rib cage like one by one by one, and then I think at that point she dies. Somewhere in between there, she dies. Her She stops screaming. Her body just goes limp, and I was just like, "Oh my god, they are really up in the ante this season." The only other death that I want to talk about, I mean, there's plenty of deaths in this season. But the one that I want to talk about next is probably the last one I want to talk about and just pinpoint. It was the Asian girl. I can't remember her name. So forgive me for that. She was a play tester. She always had the VR. She was Xander's partner. So her deal was she like when she was younger. She had a flashback, or we all had a flashback of her as a kid with her parents going on a trip or something like that, and then her dad texts, you know, you shouldn't text while you drive, or at least not. I don't know, just don't text and drive, people. We've learned this from the past Black Mirror episode that I reviewed. But her dad was texting and driving, ended up killing him. He he ended up killing him, and then the mother lived for a little bit to call her name out, and then the Asian girl, who was a little girl at the time, like maybe 5 or 6 years old, she's like, "Mommy, mommy, don't you'll be okay." And then she dies like right in front of her. Both her parents died, bloody in a heap of mess right in front of her. And then the last thing you see from that is her just walking away from from the crash car alone, like a 5-year old girl with blood on her face, soaking, tears, crying. And then it flashes back to her um, in current day. Now, since she's gone through that traumatic experience, she is like very, I don't know how to describe her, but she's like very tuned out from the world. She wants to only be in the virtual reality world because she doesn't like dealing with people, pretty much. And that's why she's a game tester. That's why she stays at home. She's always on VR, and VR is actually where she wants to live. There's like a scene with Xander and her. They're partners, and she was not interested in having sex at all, but Xander was all for it. And then she got on top of him, and then the only reason she agreed to have sex was if she was able to put the VR on. Now we never see what was in the VR that got her off, but she literally said the only time that she gets off is when she's in VR. So, I mean, the one thing that we did see when she's in VR is her fighting zombies, hacking and slashing, and she showed a lot of personality there. But eventually, what happens with her is that the druid leaves her a link to go to on her VR, which basically shows her. The druid had a GoPro on his head while he was killing her partner Xander. So she visited the link in VR, so she got the first hand see what the druid was doing to him, and that just it killed her up inside. She eventually dies by the slasher breaking into her. Oh, actually, I remember this happening. I almost forgot. So the way she died was actually it was pretty fucking scary. She was just she had tried to slit her wrists like earlier in the day, but then she advised against it. She did slit her wrist, but she wanted to actually live. And then after that, she goes to her bed, she sleeps, and then she wakes up like it's nice and serene. She wakes up, and the druid is like standing there right in the corner of her room, and then he rushes to her with a power drill and basically drills her head. Now that is the one reason people I always tell my girlfriend, why lock the door if you come in and we're about to go to sleep. Lock the fucking door because you never know if somebody breaks in and God forbid we don't hear it and they can just come in the room, kill us in our sleep or something like that. I'm very superstitious. That was very creepy to me how she died. And when she did die, they did a flashback to when she was a kid, and then with the blood on her face, and then it turned back to her older self. She had blood on her face, and she was. It was like a picture in picture almost. It was like a flashback for that, and it was very sad. I don't know. She just had, I don't know, her character. I wanted to see it fleshed out more. She was always sad. I just wanted her to, I don't know, have like a triumphant moment or something. But this is slasher. We know they can't get that. Now, on to the nitty gritty. Let's get into the meat of the story and the end. Now, this whole druid thing started mostly. Well, it started with Kit. Kit is the guy in the first scene who dies, and he's been in it with everybody. So he dies, and then there's a couple. There's a gay couple that has two kids, Connor and I forgot the other girl's name. Connor and Jen, and like their family gets harassed all the time because they're a gay couple and nobody likes them. So when Kit died, they had altercations with Kit all the time. And when Kit died, one of the mother of well, one of the gay couples. I really need to get their name, but they took a video and then they posted it on Twitter, and then they were saying like, "Oh, he got what he deserved." And then at that moment, it started a shitstorm for her, and that should be a lesson for everybody. Watch what you post online because you never know what'll come back to haunt you. So basically, what happened is she posts this. Everybody gets down on their case. They get death threats to their kids and then to themselves, saying they're going to come to their house and kill them in the middle of the night and do worse to them or something like that. And then that stress ends up eating at one of the mother's one of the females is psyche, and she ends up going out into the parking lot of this apartment building and burning herself alive while everybody watched. She was like, "You all," she just couldn't take it anymore. She's like, you all drove me to this. You did nothing to help me. You just bashed me, bullied me, and now I'm just gonna end it all." Basically, that don't quote me for that, but she basically sets herself on fire. Her kids are watching. Her spouse or girlfriend is watching, and they're just all horrified. The whole apartment building's horrified, and they got their phones out, and then they're just videotaping it. Nobody's coming to help. Nobody tried to stop her or anything. Now that will come into play in the end of this, in the end of this series, and the end of this review, but we aren't going to get to that yet. we still got a few more things to talk about. Now, in this apartment building with all these different characters, and they all living their lives, doing what they want, they're all interacting with each other, mostly in a negative way. There was one Indian family, or Middle Eastern family, not Indian, I guess. Middle Eastern family that came over from the Middle East. They were escaping and fleeing the war and stuff that was over there. Now, Saudia, who is their daughter, she's she's friends with the she's friends with Jin. Jin is the one whose mother burned herself in front of everybody. So those two are best friends. Now, that is important again because that'll come into play in the end. Saudia remembers in the Middle East, she like her family burning, not her parents specifically, but her family, maybe extended family burning from the fires and all of that stuff, the people coming in and killing them. She was hiding, but she remembered the smell of burning bodies, and that traumatized her and gives her flashbacks every now and then. She has those moments where she's like, if you remember That's So Raven, where she just like her eyes bulge out and then she just goes into a different realm. She has those moments and she just pukes, and it's PTSD basically what it is. Another two characters I want to bring up is the landlord, and I don't Angel is his name. He's one of the residential gay guys. He had an affair with another couple. He had an affair with the guy of another couple in the apartment building, which caused a lot of turmoil. And the landlord and him get into fights left and right. The landlord's really racist. He's like a white nationalist, and he really hates anybody. He hates Saudia's family. He hates any any gay couple or anything going on in his apartment building. He doesn't physically do anything about it, but he spouts racial slurs at them all the time. And Angel and him get into it so much. And what eventually happens is, in the end, we're just going to skip to the end here because there's a lot of stuff that happens in between, but I'm going to try to keep this short and concise as much as I can. So Angel and the landlord get tricked into going into this underground basement or something, and they get locked into this room where they end up fighting. They have their they keep their distance for a while, but then they end up getting into each other's face, and Angel ends up beating the living shit out of the landlord because he just kept spouting racial slurs at him for being gay and queer and all of that stuff. So they get into a fight, and then they find out after that that they're next to a furnace. Now, in this furnace, the landlord goes into it, and there's bodies everywhere, bodies chopped up of everybody that the druid has killed. So, the druid also comes down there every now and then to, burn more body parts. I don't know exactly what he was doing. I mean, I know he's getting rid of the evidence, but I don't know. That just seemed like a bad way to do it, or maybe it was a good way. I don't know. I'm not a killer, so I can't condone his activity. Now they are the ones who discover who the killer really is, who the druid really is, and it turns out that it is man, what is his name? It turns out it is Connor. Connor, the sister of Jin, whose mother, who their siblings, their mother burned herself in front of everybody. He held such a grudge at that point. He he snapped in his own way. He never showed any inkling of really snapping or any kind of weird attitude towards anybody this whole season. He's been more of the level-headed kind of guy in this whole season until like the latter episodes, which I enjoy. I like that twist compared to the other twists in the last few seasons of Slasher. Those didn't make sense, or you really didn't get a clue. But near the end, you start getting those hints that Connor may be pretty fucked up. Some of the stuff that he's saying and doing, and the little mannerisms, he could be the killer. So Connor actually has a crush on Sadia, and Sadia has a crush on him, and Jen, who's his sister, she was kind of egging them on to get together and stuff like that. They were never they weren't never in the same place for too long, which that makes sense because it turns out that Jen was helping Connor work as the druid. So she was the druid at some points, and then he was the druid at some points. And they just worked together killing these people. Sadia finds this out and she's freak she can't believe that her best friend in the world who defended her when everybody was calling her hijab head and all these racist names regarding her Middle Eastern background. This friend stood up for her all the time, and now she turns out to be the killer who's been killing everybody with her brother. She freaks out and tries to leave, but then we flash back to the boiler room where the furnace is going. Connor's chopping up a few more bodies, and then Angel and the landlord actually devise a plan to attack him while he's doing that, while his back is turned. They do that, and Connor actually defends himself and fights them off pretty well for a while until Angel just goes beast mode. He sees his former lover chopped up in the bathtub, and he wants to kill Connor 20 times over. So he throws his head into the he doesn't toss he puts Connor in the furnace head first. His hands are in there too. Connor's being burned half of his body. He's dead, and then Angel falls back down on the ground, and his arms are just like roasted completely off, or they're still on, but they're just roasted to high hell, and he ends up dying. I don't particularly know how he died. Maybe his body went into shock. He had so much adrenaline going, and I mean, I don't know how he died because even if his arms got burnt, he should have still lived. There was a lot of stuff going on with him during that time, but I still don't really know how he died. And then we flash forward to Jin, not Jin, but Sadia coming down to the furnace to find find the landlord and all these dead bodies, and she's just puking and everything. Well, she's not puking, but she's having flashbacks. And then Jin pops up behind her with an axe or something. She had some kind of sword or something. It was like some kind of weird sword knife thing. It's almost like it resembles Thanos's sword from Infinity War or the last one. And right here is when we get one of the best scenes of all the seasons. One of the best scenes I think I've seen in a while in horror movies in general. So Jen comes down there. She's been so nice throughout this whole season. She's been so nice, but she turned a switch on. Her eyes were bulging out. She turned that crazy lady's crazy teenage switch on, and she was just, oh my god. She like the way she was acting, it sent chills up my spine. It was so good. What is her name? What is the actor's name? I need to give her credit. Mercedes Morris, that's her name. She did an excellent job at portraying this killer in the end. Holy shit, man. I can't give her enough credit. So the landlord gets out of there. He's been beaten up to high hell, so he gets out of there, leaves the two best friends to Sadia has the axe, and then Jin has the Thanos sword or whatever, the sword that she had. And they end up Jin stabs Sadia in the neck, and then Sadia drives the axe into her leg, and then pretty much that disables her enough, giving her enough time to get out with the landlord. So they end up getting out of there. All you hear is Jin screaming, "Sadia, get back here!" or something like that. So they get on the. It's so cool. You have to watch this scene if you haven't seen it yet, or rewatch it. That shit was so good. You see the landlord and Sadia, who have hated each other this whole season. They look at each other looking at down the hall, and then the elevator doors close and they go up, and then they start walking towards the exit of the apartment building, and they're just so beat up at this point in time. Sadia's got a fucking knife in her neck, and the landlord has just been bruised from the fight with Angel and the fight with Connor, and he's just hanging on by a thread. And then all of a sudden, they're not going the fastest, and all of a sudden you hear the ding of the elevator, and guess who it is? It's fucking Jen. She's saying, "Get back here, you son of a bitch." Uh, I'm freaking. I'm this. Don't quote me on this. That's not what they said, but that's what I'm imagining in my head. It was so good. They started a chase scene where they eventually Sadia ends up killing her best friend, unfortunately. And then they walk out. The landlord and Sadia walk out together, and it's the next morning at this point, and pretty much they're just standing there, just wondering what the fuck do they do next, and everything that they just went through, nobody can really tell their tale but them. So that's basically how it ended. Now, one more scene that I almost forgot, one more death scene. So the detective lady that's been, like I said, she was a recurring character in every episode, trying to get to the bottom of these murders. She ends up finding the furnace or the place where the landlord and Angel were being kept, and then the druid just comes up behind her and chops her with the axe to her throat or something like that. She goes down immediately, and then that's actually when you get the reveal that Connor is the druid. He takes off the mask, and then he basically tells her why he's doing this. You did nothing. You took forever to. You didn't do anything to solve the murders, or not the murders, but you didn't do anything to help my mom or something like that. And everybody in the apartment building is guilty. So what Connor ends up doing is taking the blunt side of the axe and smashing her head over and over and over and over again. Like, it went on for an ungodly amount of time. And then all you see after that fact is that she doesn't even have a face anymore. It's like her face was beaten in, and all you see is like teeth and just pulp. It was disgusting. Disgusting. And that actually reminds me of a scene from Irreversible, which is, I mean, don't watch that movie if you don't have a strong stomach, because that movie is fucked up. But there's a scene where two guys break into, they find the killer, they find a killer, and then they just take a fire extinguisher and smash his head in repeatedly, over and over again, until it's like flat and almost you can't recognize it. It's just a bloody pulp. The difference between that movie and in this, you don't see it. You see it happening in the slasher episode, but in Irreversible, you see it in real time. So that just freaked me out. You can see the face as it slowly began to smash. But that's besides the point. That's a different movie for a different day. That basically was my review of Slasher. I fucking love this episode. I love this season. I give it a 9 out of 10 just because I wish they kind of got the ball rolling a little bit quicker. It just, I don't know. It just started out really, like, some of the characters were very, how would I describe? They were like acting too hard, and it just wasn't believable, some of the actors. But near the end, once those characters got weeded out, and the core characters who could really act super well, once they got into it and this was their show, oh my god, it kicked up to like a 10 for me. But I'm still going to give it a 9 out of 10. I don't have too many complaints about this season. The only complaint that I do have is that it included a lot of sex. Like, too much sex, too much guy on guy sex, and there's nothing wrong with gay couples. I mean, I have family members that are gay, and I have like a few friends that are gay, and I get along with them very well. I don't care about what they do. Everybody should be happy with who you are and do what you want to do. But there was just too much sex in this show. Like, even with guy and girl sex, I mean, especially when it was guy on guy sex, I mean, I don't particularly want to see that. Uh, just in the next season, I hope they just tone down the sex in general. I don't want to. There's there's a need for some sex, I guess, but in every episode, the first 5 episodes contain like 2 sex scenes each in each little episode, and that just kind of it took me out of it. It took me out of it sometimes, but yeah, guys, that's my review of Slasher season 3, Solstice, and I give it a 9 out of 10. It was so amazing. I'm definitely gonna probably watch that last episode over again just for those final scenes. It was just so great, so great in terms of a horror movie. The horror category in general. It was just so good. So, yeah, guys, leave your comments down below and let me know what your favorite death scene was. Was this hard to watch for you too? Like, were you squeamish or anything like that? And are you looking forward to the next season? That's the real question. And I think Netflix is safe to say everybody wants to see a season 4. So hopefully we see a season 4, and hopefully it's just as good as this. But anyway, guys, leave a like on the video if you liked it. Leave a dislike if you didn't like it. Algorithms help me either way. And also leave a comment. Just let me know what you thought. And I will see you guys in the next video review. I don't know what it'll be, but it'll be something on Netflix. But yeah, guys, see you later. This is Akatsuki Akuma out of here, aka the Horror Nerd. See ya. Peace.